To this mentorship session, I'm Dr. Afrin Rajai and I'm a core faculty in our online program at Alliance. In this short session, I'm going to talk about career pathways in CFT couples and family therapy or marriage and family therapy. Is that most of us go to CFT, MFT programs is because we want to be a therapist, right? A licensed therapist eventually. And while that is a great goal, I think that there are just many different options out there that we don't talk about or we don't hear about them. Maybe because even like other people's or our mentors have not thought about them that much or heard about them that much. But the reason that I chose this topic for my mentorship sessions is because I usually find it interesting with students when we have these conversations and when I show them, hey, there are all these other options out there. So if you want to be a therapist, that's awesome. That's usually the main goal in CFT programs and you get training in that, but also know that there are so many other options out there that you can explore if you want to. So it's about promoting your agency and the options that you have out there. And with students, I usually ask them, when you're thinking about studying CFT, MFT, what comes to mind? When you think about, down the road, the career pathway, what comes to mind for you, right? And a lot of times what I hear is, as I mentioned before, the first and, the bold option out there is being a therapist. And then sometimes the students, they also talk about being a professor and, having their own private practice. So again, like in this short time that we have together, I'm going to show you that there are other options out there that you can also explore and see if you are interested in and if you want to be active in those worlds as well. Training that you get in CFT and MFT programs, basically the different things that we can do, we can categorize them in different worlds. So you can be active in the clinical world, which is usually being a therapist or having your own private practice. Then you can be active in the research world, right? Especially if you are studying in a PhD or Ph.D. program. The other world is the administrative world, right? So when you become a director or if you have the opportunity to work with agencies or in a kind of like industry environment where you have the opportunity to work with policy makings, those kinds of things. And then the other option, the other world kind of like that we can be active in is the training world, right? So that can be about being a teacher, a professor, that can be about the different kind of like workshops that you may have for public audience, for therapists, specifically for CFT students. So if we want just to start this conversation, I want you to consider all these different worlds that you can be active as a person who's studying or who has studied, CFT or MFT in your, journey, on your journey. The next thing that you want to think about is when you think about your future career is you have the option to be an employee, you have the option to be, an employer down the road, and you have the option to work as a freelancer, right? And all those different options, they come with pros and cons. Some they have, more time flexibility, some they have less flexibility, some they have more, may include more stress or situations. So each of them, they need different kind of like skill sets sometimes, and they come with pros and cons. So in all this conversation, it's not about better or good or bad, right? It's about just the thing that you feel it's the best fit for you. And again, like promoting your agency and increasing the options that are in front of you and thinking about them maybe in a different way, because sometimes we don't get a chance to think about them in a way that we are talking in this lecture or mentorship session in our classes. Some of the options or examples, some of the career pathways that you can have as a CFT, you see on this slide that you can be a researcher, a teacher, a therapist, a supervisor, director. And some of the other options are the options that you hear or you've heard less about them. So you can be content developer. And these days, with the improvement that we have in social media and technology, content developer for different social media platforms that we have, such as Instagram, all these different websites and blog. blogs and being a blogger. It's just a huge thing out there, and they actually make it's a great business as well. So the money that they make, I think it's great if you compare it with the beginning journey of a therapist. The other role that you can have as a CFD, someone who studies CFD, is consultant. So consultant, for these days, especially in the past 2 years, we have so many mental health companies, and they provide different services. Some of them they provide clinical services, and some of them they do not provide any kind of like clinical services. They kind of like match people with the clinical services out there, right? So no matter what they are about, but all these mental health companies, a lot of times they need a consultant for enhancing their services, for the troubleshootings that the different problems that they may face on a daily basis. So all these different things, again, like this is kind of like maybe more newish kind of like role that we have without field, but it's also another role that you can consider down the road. The next role could be policy advocate, and again, like policy advocate, they work in different agencies or companies, and they work on policy rules, making policy debriefs, those kinds of things. The other role that you can have is, CFT and MFT, they're all about promoting systemic perspective, diversity lens, social justice, injustice issues. So social justice advocate, which, again, like can manifest itself in many different ways, right? So you can become a public speaker, you can do policy makings, or, consultation. You can do, can have a kind of like a social media platform, and you work on the content that you prepare for the audience. So all these different options. The other role is podcast developer, and again, like it may seem easy, but with the knowledge and skills that you have, there are so many different things that you can do, and you can create and be creative in a world of podcasts, and many different topics, many different ways of doing this, talking about examples of bad therapy, good therapy, all these different things. And the same thing is about kind of like a YouTube platform, right? Having a channel there. And I know sometimes when people, they hear about those options, they feel like, oh, they are not real jobs. And if you're someone who thinks like that, I mean, that's okay. That's for you. But for some other people, when they hear about these options, they're like, that's interesting. I've never thought of it, right? I always thought that I study CFD and I become a therapist, and that's the only option. While I just want to show you that there are other options as well. The other option out there is well-being director, which is a really cool one. I really like it. One of my friends, she has a Ph.D. and she's a well-being director at a hospital in Texas. So all she does, which is amazing, is like she's in charge of well-being of employee in that hospital, especially physicians and nurses. And thinking about all these different, it's not about providing therapy, it's about surveys and talking with them and providing programs and advocating for healthcare team. So at the end of the day, they experience much higher quality of well-being, which is again like so cool. And again, like it's something that it's improving, it's growing all over the country and nation in different fields, not just healthcare, but in all these different companies. The other thing is, obviously you can have a startup company. That's a little bit maybe more scary for some people, because you need to have money and connections and stuff like that. But again, like it's something that is out there and you can think about it, maybe again like not just for tomorrow, but like down the road. The other thing that is interesting is app software developer. This is especially interesting for people, when I talk about this, for people who, like in their network, in their family members, in their friends, they have a software engineer, they have people, data analyst person, and then they never just connect the dots, right? So, but when I mentioned this option, they're like, that's so interesting, because I feel like I have the resources and I have some idea, but I never, connected the dots kind of like together. So again, like an option out there for you to think about. The other option is scale developer. So this one is a little bit tricky when you see the title, because in MFT or CFT, we don't get trained to become a scale developer. And I don't mean for this title for you to be a solely kind of like scale developer. But again, like with all the different things that are going on in the world, there are different labs and different kind of like companies that they are working on scales and different skills, and they would love to have another set of eyes with another set of skills to help with them. I have personally some experience with this. I work with in a lab, positive psychology lab in a university in Los Angeles, and they were working on developing a scale, and then I got hired to help them with some part of the project. So again, like not that we have the fundamental training for that, but the kind of training that we have and our systemic perspective and diversity lens could be very, very helpful. Again, like just to think about the options that you have. Live sessions, this is the last part that we have, and we start having a conversation. Students, they ask questions and we answer the questions and we have a conversation. They also give us feedback about the content that we were talking about. So if you're listening to this or watching this and you have questions, please feel free to email me. My email is afarin.rajaei@alliant.edu, and I'm more than happy to get your feedback or answer your questions. And thank you for watching this.